The corridors of the Galactic Concorde flagship station were silent, save for the hum of starship engines and the occasional whisper of diplomats. The Grand Council Hall, where decisions that shaped the future of thousands of worlds were made, was usually a place of solemnity and gravitas. But today, the air was thick with tension as the summit convened for another round of diplomatic talks. Species from across the galaxy, some ancient, others still barely out of their primordial phase, sat in their assigned seats, waiting for the humans to arrive. Commander Ilara Voss, head of the United Terran Republic's diplomatic delegation, stood at the threshold of the hall, her expression unreadable. Her sharp black uniform, adorned with the symbols of Terran military might, contrasted sharply with the bright, flowing robes of her fellow ambassadors. She was an anomaly here, an outsider both in temperament and appearance. While most of the Concorde's leaders were content with endless negotiations and appeasements, Ilara was different. She had fought in the Terran War, commanded fleets, and led soldiers. Diplomacy, to her, was not just a matter of talk. It was a matter of action. Her footsteps echoed as she crossed the hall, the murmurs of the gathered species fading into an expectant silence. She took her seat at the Terran delegation table, glancing once at the holographic screen displaying the projected agenda. Peace talks with the Tygar Bloodkin, the persistent threat to human colonies on the Outer Rim. A ceasefire agreement, drafted and revised for months, only to be ignored again. And then, the question of the Pax Concordia, the binding treaty that kept the peace between species who would otherwise tear each other apart. The time for endless discussion had passed. Ilara raised her hand, calling the attention of the assembly. The room went still as she stood, every pair of eyes trained on her. "I will not waste your time with words you've heard too many times already," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber like a cutting blade. "The Terran Republic will no longer be a participant in these farcical summits." Gasps rippled through the room. The diplomatic council members exchanged confused glances, uncertain if they had heard her correctly. Ilara's gaze swept across the room, meeting the eyes of the other ambassadors. She had always been direct, but this was something more. The Concorde has failed, not just with the Exigar, but with countless other conflicts, she continued, her tone firm. You have debated, you have deliberated, and while you have spoken, worlds have burned, colonies have fallen, families have been destroyed, and still you sit here, arguing, playing games with the lives of billions. The gravity of her words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. She paused for a moment, letting the room digest her accusation. Then she dropped the final bombshell. As of today, humanity is withdrawing from all future peace conferences. We will handle our own affairs from here on out. A murmur spread like wildfire through the room. Some ambassadors leaned in to whisper among themselves. Others sat in stunned silence. But in the back of the room, a few of the older species exchanged glances that spoke volumes. They had known this moment would come. Humanity was no longer a mere addition to the galactic order. It was something more, something different. Ilara turned to leave, but before she reached the door, she turned back to the assembly. You are welcome to join us, she said, her voice colder now. But make no mistake, this galaxy will bend to those who act, not those who wait. With that, she left the hall, leaving behind a shaken council and a galaxy on the brink of chaos. The announcement from Commander Ilara Voss echoed across every corner of the galaxy. Humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Concorde's peace conferences wasn't just a political shift, it was a declaration, a challenge. And while some on Earth cheered her decision, many others feared it would spark a war. Back on Earth, the mood was divided. In the heart of the capital, the streets were alive with protests, some in support of the move, others vehemently opposed. The media was rife with debates, pundits shouting about the potential consequences. But behind closed doors, in the war rooms of the United Terran Republic's government, there was no hesitation. Humanity had made its choice. Ilara Voss stood at the head of the UTR's military command center, her voice calm but steely as she addressed the council of senior officers. "We are no longer bound by the Concord's slow machinery. We will act as we see fit. The first phase of the new strategy is simple: total defense of human space. We will not wait for permission, nor will we wait for the Concord to intervene. Any threat to our colonies will be met with swift and overwhelming force." A senior admiral raised an eyebrow, her fingers tapping nervously on the holoscreen. "Commander, we're not just talking about pirates anymore. The Xigar, the Zathori, these are full-fledged military forces. Engaging them could escalate things beyond our control." Ilara's gaze hardened. "You think I don't know that? Our colonies have been under siege for far too long. If the Concord cannot protect us, then we will protect ourselves. We cannot afford to wait for another pointless peace summit." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. They understood the urgency in Ilara's voice. She had seen the cost of hesitation firsthand. But this was different. This was more than a military action. It was a challenge to the entire galactic order. In the coming days, the UTR military began to move with a decisiveness that stunned the galaxy. The Terran fleet, once confined to human space, expanded outward, seizing control of critical trade routes, establishing strongholds on previously neutral worlds, and hunting down pirate factions that had long preyed on human settlements. Their tactics were ruthless and efficient. No lengthy negotiations, no endless diplomatic talks. The message was clear: humanity would defend itself, and it would do so without compromise. The ripple effect was immediate. The Concord was thrown into turmoil. A council meeting was called, a hurried emergency summit, to address the growing concerns over humanity's unilateral actions. The Xigar bloodkin, emboldened by humanity's retreat from the Concord, launched an assault on a vital Terran colony in the Outer Rim. A swift, brutal assault that left hundreds of thousands dead, and the system in ruins. As the Concord's representatives bickered over how to respond, Ilara watched from the comfort of her private command deck. She had been prepared for this. The Xigar were always a threat to human space, and now humanity would answer. No longer would they rely on the Concord to slow down a conflict that had been brewing for decades. The UTR fleet launched its response almost immediately. The battle was fierce, but within 3 days, the Xigar bloodkin were decimated. Their fleet, once a formidable force in the Outer Rim, was shattered, leaving only the blackened remains of their ships in the aftermath. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. Humanity had acted, and it had done so with a brutality that would forever change the course of the galaxy. As the Terran fleets moved back into their space, the galaxy could only watch in stunned silence. Some feared the consequences of such unchecked power. Others saw it as a sign of hope. A galaxy that had been stagnant for too long had just witnessed what it meant to be alive again. Ilara Voss stood at the edge of a war that would rewrite history. There was no going back now. The galaxy was holding its breath. Humanity's shockwaves, sent through the heart of the Galactic Concord, continued to reverberate. The news of the Xigar bloodkin's defeat spread like wildfire, but the true impact of the Terran action hadn't fully settled yet. Many had expected humanity's withdrawal from the peace summits to be a temporary rebellion, a bold gesture that would pass. Instead, it had turned into a defining moment. The old order was already beginning to unravel. Within a week, the UTR's new directives were broadcast to the entire galaxy. No longer were the Terran military forces on the defensive. They would now aggressively patrol neutral space, securing trade routes, and preventing hostile factions from gaining any foothold in sectors that were once deemed safe zones for all. The message was simple: no one would be allowed to touch human interests without retribution. Across the galaxy, the response was mixed. Smaller species, oppressed by the galactic elite for centuries, watched with eager eyes as humanity's unrelenting actions seemed to signal the end of a status quo that had never worked in their favor. Secret meetings between members of the Alliance of the Resolute, a coalition of oppressed worlds, began to emerge. Humanity had no interest in appeasing the old guard anymore, and for these disenfranchised species, that was a promise of something better. In contrast, the major powers of the Concord were scrambling. The Axigar had been one of their most notorious threats, and humanity had wiped them out with precision and swiftness. The Zethori, a merciless warrior race, now eyed humanity with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Would they be next? Could they hold their ground against the Terrans, or would they too fall under the iron fist of the United Terran Republic? The first to respond was the Atron, the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy, known for their long lives and vast psychic abilities. They were the self-appointed stewards of galactic order. Their leaders had been watching humanity closely, aware of the Terran potential. Now, with Ilara's bold decision to leave the Concord, the Atron saw something they had never expected. Humanity wasn't just a wild card. It was a new force that could not be ignored. An Atron envoy, led by Evosthara, a high-ranking member of their ruling council, arrived at Terran space. A diplomatic vessel, sleek and imposing, appeared on Earth's outer rim, demanding to meet with Ilara Voss directly. The message was clear. Humanity's refusal to play by the Concord's rules had not gone unnoticed. It was time for the old order to confront this new power. In a secret meeting aboard the Terran flagship Resolute, Ilara sat face-to-face with Evosthara, the Atran representative, with their translucent skin and otherworldly aura, studied her with unblinking eyes. "You have changed the course of this galaxy, Terran Commander," Evosthara said, their voice an unsettling mix of both authority and intrigue. "Your actions have proven that you are capable of much more than simply surviving. But make no mistake, you will not go unchecked. There are forces in this galaxy that will not tolerate your ascent." Ilara leaned forward, her voice calm but unwavering. "The galaxy has already tolerated the inaction of the Concord for far too long. We've learned that silence only breeds chaos. If you want a galaxy that thrives, not just survives, you'll have to recognize the new reality." Evosthara's lips curled in what could be interpreted as a smile, though it was far too unsettling to be reassuring. "Perhaps. But know this, human. Your methods are unorthodox. Your ambitions, dangerous. You have drawn the attention of many. Be cautious. The storm you have begun may sweep you away before you are ready to face the true powers of the galaxy." Ilara's eyes didn't waver. "Then we'll face them head-on, as we always have. Humanity doesn't ask for permission. We take what is ours." With that, the Atron envoy departed. The meeting, though tense, marked a pivotal moment. Humanity was not just a disruptor in the galaxy anymore. They were becoming a force that the old powers had to reckon with. As the Terran fleet moved deeper into neutral space and the alliance of the Resolute swelled in number, it became clear that the galaxy was on the brink of a new chapter. The storm was coming, and no one could predict who would emerge victorious. But humanity, for the first time, wasn't just reacting. They were leading. The shockwaves of humanity's actions continued to ripple outward, reverberating through the farthest reaches of the galaxy. As the Atron envoy departed, leaving behind only veiled threats and cryptic warnings, Ilara Voss sat quietly in her private chambers aboard the Resolute. Her mind raced, not with fear, but with calculation. The Atron were right about one thing. Humanity's methods were dangerous. But they had also proven something undeniable. The galaxy could no longer ignore them. While humanity's military actions had secured its immediate borders, a new challenge was emerging. The once aloof races, the minor species who had been squeezed under the weight of the Concord's bureaucracy, were now looking to Earth. They saw the Terrans as a potential ally, a symbol of hope. Humanity's willingness to act where the Concord had failed made them the only viable option for those desperate for change. Across the galaxy, the alliance of the Resolute was growing. Composed of smaller and less powerful species, worlds that had long been under the thumb of larger powers like the Xaltri, the Zethori, and the Atron, the alliance was uniting under a simple, urgent premise. survival. The Concorde's failure to protect these marginalized species from aggression, piracy, and exploitation had created a power vacuum, and humanity was filling it. In one of the Alliance's hidden meeting chambers, a covert summit was called. Representatives of over 30 different species gathered, each one eagerly awaiting humanity's decision. The leaders of these oppressed worlds were not foolish. They knew the risks of allying with the Terrans, but they had also seen what humanity had done to the Kaikar. They had witnessed their brutal efficiency and had come to understand that the old ways of the galaxy, diplomacy, endless peace talks, compromises, would no longer hold sway. The summit was held in secrecy on a small, uncharted moon, far from the prying eyes of the Concorde or the Atran. As the holographic projection of Ilara Voss appeared before the gathered delegates, the room went silent. "I won't waste your time with pleasantries," Ilara said, her voice resolute and sharp. "You know what humanity has done. We've shown you that we act, that we take what is ours and protect what we've built. And that's what we offer you. Protection, power, and, when necessary, retribution." A quiet murmur spread across the room. Some species were hesitant, their leaders unsure of the path forward. Others, scared by years of oppression, were more eager, leaning forward in their seats, their eyes wide with anticipation. A representative from the Saltry, a fierce, reptilian species known for their intelligence and warlike nature, spoke first. "And what of our sovereignty, Terran Commander? We have long fought for independence, yet your forces have shown no hesitation in overriding the Concorde's borders. How can we trust that we will not fall under your rule, as we have under others?" Ilara's gaze was unwavering. "I'm not here to rule you. I'm here to offer you something no one else has, the chance to defend yourself, to have a voice in your future, and the strength to back it up. The Concorde has failed you, just as it failed humanity. But we will not. You will have autonomy under the Union of Sovereign Stars, a new galactic order, one built on strength, respect, and mutual defense." The room fell into tense silence as the delegates processed her words. Finally, the leader of the Tsul, a race of pacifistic herbivores whose planet had been ravaged by the Zethori in recent years, spoke up. "We've lost everything to the Zethori. Our worlds are in ruins. How can we rebuild without power to defend ourselves?" Ilara nodded, acknowledging the weight of the question. "Humanity offers you power, not just military might, but the means to defend yourselves economically, technologically, and strategically. You will have allies, and in this new order, we won't allow the strong to prey on the weak any longer." One by one, the leaders of the smaller species began to murmur in agreement, some hesitantly, others with more certainty. The alliance of the Resolute was no longer just a theory, it was becoming a reality. And with each passing moment, humanity's influence in the galaxy solidified. "We will stand with you," Ilara concluded, her voice resolute. "But know this, in the new galaxy we're building, the weak will no longer decide the fate of the strong. Together, we will forge a new path." As the meeting broke up and the delegates returned to their respective worlds, the galaxy began to sense the shift. Humanity was no longer an outsider. It was the axis around which the future of the galaxy would revolve. The formation of the Union of Sovereign Stars was only the beginning. Humanity's newfound alliances with the smaller, oppressed species had quickly gained momentum, but it also stirred a dangerous undercurrent of resistance from the galactic powers. The Zethori, furious at their humiliating defeat at the hands of the Terrans, were the first to make their move. They had never been ones to hide their animosity, and now they saw the growing influence of the Union as a direct challenge to their dominance. A fleet of Zethori warships appeared at the edges of human-controlled space, a menacing presence that loomed like a dark cloud. The message they sent was blunt and brutal. Humanity would not be allowed to expand its influence any further. Ilara sat in her command chair aboard the Resolute, watching as the fleet's approach was tracked in real time. Her eyes narrowed, but her expression remained composed. She had expected this. The Zethori were not known for their subtlety, and they never took kindly to threats to their power. The time for diplomacy was over. The time for action had arrived. "We've given them enough time," Ilara said, her voice steady. "Prepare the fleet for engagement. We don't need another war, but we won't back down either." The crew of the Resolute moved with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, the Terran fleet began to assemble, its ships materializing from the folds of space, ready to respond to the Zethori provocation. The Union of Sovereign Stars had pledged their support, and fleets from several member worlds were already on standby, ready to aid humanity in the face of this aggression. As the Zethori fleet drew closer, a lone envoy ship broke away from their formation, its holographic transmissions crackling with static as it hailed the Resolute. The figure that appeared on the screen was a familiar one. Chikura, the Zethori High General who had once led the bloody assault on humanity's outer rim colonies. "This is an ultimatum, Terran." Chikura's voice rumbled through the comms, his words dripping with venom. "Withdraw from the neutral systems and abandon your alliance with these weaklings, or we will destroy you." Ilara leaned forward, her eyes cold as steel. "You've forgotten who you're speaking to, General. Humanity doesn't bow to threats. We act, and if you try to cross our borders, we will make you regret it." The Zethori's ship flickered as Chikura scowled, but there was no hiding the flicker of doubt in his eyes. The Terrans had already proven their resolve once, and now the Zethori were faced with the reality of a full-scale war with a species that would not back down. Without another word, the transmission was severed, and the Zethori fleet advanced, their weapons primed and their ships bristling with deadly intent. But humanity had prepared for this moment. The Resolute fired its first salvo before the Zethori could even fully charge their weapons. The strike hit with pinpoint precision, crippling the lead Zethori ship and sending shockwaves through their formation. The battle that followed was brutal, but it was clear that the Zethori were outmatched. Humanity's newfound allies fought alongside them with coordinated ferocity, proving that the Union was more than just a collection of weak worlds. It was a force to be reckoned with. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. Humanity had once again struck decisively, defeating the Zethori in a battle that would go down in history as a turning point. The galaxy was waking up to the truth. The Terrans were no longer just a species of survivors. They were conquerors, diplomats, and warriors all at once, and they were ready to reshape the galaxy in their image. The Zethori, crippled but not broken, retreated back into their territory. The battle was over, for now, but the message had been sent. The Union was a power to be reckoned with, and the galaxy would have to adjust. Whether as allies or enemies, humanity would no longer be ignored. The victory over the Zethori had been swift and decisive, but the galaxy's reaction was far from unified. While many of the smaller species in the Union of Sovereign Stars celebrated the Terran triumph, a dark undercurrent of fear and resentment began to spread. Humanity had struck with ruthless efficiency, yes, but that very efficiency made many uneasy. The galaxy was changing, and not all of its inhabitants were pleased with this new reality. Ilara Voss stood in the command center of the Resolute, her mind racing through the possible ramifications of the battle. The Zethori had been only the first in what would likely become a series of challenges. The Atron, those ancient and powerful beings who considered themselves the guardians of galactic order, had yet to fully weigh in on the conflict, but Ilara knew their patience was wearing thin. Humanity's ascent could not go unchallenged forever. The news arrived quickly. The Etran High Council had summoned Ilara to an emergency summit. This wasn't a request, it was a demand. "They're making their move," Ilara murmured to herself, staring at the message. "It's time to face them." The galaxy's largest and most influential power, the Atran had long believed themselves the stewards of peace and order, and they had ruled with an iron fist behind the scenes. For millennia, they had kept the balance of power in check, bending lesser species to their will while maintaining a cold, distant diplomacy with others like the Zethori. But humanity's defiance, its sheer will to upend the old order, had finally pushed them to act. It wasn't just the Atran that were watching, though. Reports filtered in of cracks appearing in the Union itself. The smaller species, who had rallied behind humanity's promise of strength and protection, were now divided. The Tsol, a peaceful species of pacifists, began to express doubts. They feared that the Union's reliance on military strength would lead them down the same path as the very powers they had once opposed. Would they become just another pawn in humanity's game of galactic domination? The Exaltri and other former allies of the old Concord were already mobilizing their forces in response to the Zethori defeat. They whispered about the Terran threat, seeing humanity's decisive action as an omen of an impending galactic conflict, one that could tip the scales too far in favor of the Union's growing power. The galaxy was on the brink. Ilara could feel it. She gathered her most trusted advisors on the Resolute's command deck. Her fleet was ready, but this meeting would be about more than just military action. It would be about strategy, about maintaining the fragile alliances that humanity had forged with its new allies. "I've called this meeting because we have a choice to make," Ilara began, her voice unwavering. "The Zethori were the first to test us, and we won. But now, the Atran are stepping into the fray. They won't tolerate our presence in their sphere of influence, and we'll have to choose: fight them on their terms and risk everything, or offer a path to peace while we solidify our alliances." Her chief strategist, Admiral Lucius Harrow, a seasoned veteran of the Terran military, spoke up. "The Atran will try to break us. They'll come with offers of diplomacy, but we'll have to be wary. They've never allowed anyone to challenge their authority, and they won't tolerate us building power in what they consider their domain. If we stand against them, it won't just be a war of fleets. It'll be a war of ideologies." Ilara nodded. "And we can't afford to lose the Union now. The smaller species may already be getting nervous. If we push too hard, we risk fracturing everything we've built." Her thoughts were interrupted as a flash of data came in. It was a message from the Seoul delegation, a formal request to reconsider the Union's aggressive stance. Their people were terrified that the balance of power was shifting too quickly, that humanity's might was becoming a thing of fear rather than admiration. "Damn it," Ilara muttered. "The cracks are starting to show. If we lose the Seoul now, it could snowball. We need to stabilize the Union before it splinters." With a deep breath, Ilara stood up, her resolve steeling. "We'll need to meet the Atran on neutral ground, but we'll do it on our terms. We can't afford to let them dictate the terms of this galactic order any longer. And as for the Union, we'll strengthen our ties with the species that are loyal, and ensure that those on the fence understand that our strength is not a threat, but a guarantee of their survival." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed her words. The stakes were higher than ever, and humanity was about to face its greatest challenge yet. The Atran were not just a military power. They were a symbol of the old order that had held the galaxy in place for millennia. The Resolute cut through the expanse of space, its sleek form cutting through the stars toward the Atran homeworld. Ilara Voss stood at the observation window of the command deck, her gaze steady as the familiar swirl of distant nebulae unfolded outside. The mission ahead wasn't just about diplomacy. It was about proving to the galaxy that humanity was no longer bound by the weak compromises that had defined the old order. The Atran were waiting. The invitation had been sent, and while the calm and serene exterior of the Atran homeworld suggested peaceful diplomacy, Ilara knew that beneath the surface lay centuries of arrogance and resistance to change. The Atran had ruled the galaxy in their way for far too long, and humanity's defiance was a direct threat to their vision of galactic balance. But this meeting wasn't just a diplomatic gesture, it was a challenge. Humanity had made its intentions clear. The old order had to change. The question was, would the Atran be willing to bend, or would they attempt to crush humanity's newfound power? Approaching Atran space, "Commander," the communications officer announced, snapping Ilara from her thoughts. Ilara nodded and straightened, taking her seat at the center of the command deck. "Prepare for low-orbit insertion," she ordered, "and inform the fleet. This is not just a meeting. It's the beginning of something larger." The Resolute began its descent into Etran territory, a sleek figure against the backdrop of the Etran homeworld's swirling violet skies. They had chosen a neutral landing zone, a location well within the diplomatic zone, where the ancient Etran High Council would host the summit. As the ship descended toward the surface, Ilara's thoughts raced. The stakes were higher than ever. The Etran were not a species to be underestimated, and they had resources at their disposal that humanity could not ignore. A large, imposing structure awaited them, the Etran Diplomatic Hall, where meetings of galactic importance were held, adorned with polished obsidian and translucent walls that let the light of distant stars filter through. Inside, the High Counselors sat, their ethereal presence almost unnerving. The Etran were beings of extraordinary psychic power, their presence in a room often overwhelming, and their ancient, inscrutable eyes studied Ilara as she entered. At the head of the council sat Evos Thera, the same Etran envoy who had met with Ilara on Terran soil. Now, as the leader of the High Council, Evos Thera was a symbol of the Etran's rigid hierarchy and power. Their voice was a calm, measured tone when they addressed Ilara. "Commander Voss, you are bold to come here, and your actions have left us with no choice but to meet you face to face," Evos Thera said, their voice soft yet piercing. "Humanity's influence is spreading, and your challenge to the Concord's centuries of peace is troubling." Ilara didn't flinch. "It's not a challenge to peace, Evos Thera. It's a challenge to a system that's failed us all. The Concord has failed, and humanity won't stand by while the galaxy burns. If we have to take the lead, then we will." A ripple of discomfort spread through the Etran counselors, but Evos Thera remained calm. "We are the stewards of the galaxy's order. The power you wield, your fleets, your alliances, are nothing more than the foundation of chaos. Peace can only be maintained when balance is kept." Ilara's gaze hardened. "Peace through stagnation is not peace. The galaxy is dying, and the Concord is complicit. You speak of balance, but where was the balance when entire species were wiped out under the rule of powers like the Zethori, the Exiger, and others? You have tolerated it for too long, and now humanity is saying no more." A tense silence filled the room, but it was broken when Shorlian, an Etran elder who had been silent until now, spoke. Their voice was quieter, but sharp. "Your words are dangerous, Terran. The galaxy has known peace for millennia under our guidance. What you propose is reckless. You threaten to tear apart what has taken generations to build." Ilara leaned forward, her voice low and intense. "If that peace has come at the cost of countless lives, if that peace has meant nothing more than the suppression of the weak by the strong, then that peace is nothing but an illusion, and illusions are meant to be shattered." The Etran remained unmoving, their ancient minds calculating, probing. Finally, Evos Thera spoke again, their voice almost a whisper. "Perhaps you are right, Terran. Perhaps the balance we have maintained is flawed, but we will not bend easily. If you wish to change the order of things, you will have to do so with more than words. If you are to take the mantle of leadership, you must prove it in a way that will not only shake the galaxy, but redefine it." Ilara stood tall, unwavering. "I've already proven humanity's strength. Now I'm here to show that we will lead this galaxy, not by force, but by the will to change." As the tension in the room thickened, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a test, and humanity would need more than words to survive it. The tension in the room was palpable as the Etran High Council processed Ilara's words. For centuries, they had been the undisputed custodians of the galaxy's order, their psychic powers and advanced technology allowing them to maintain a delicate, though often harsh, peace. Now, faced with the unrelenting determination of humanity, the foundations of their ancient system were beginning to crack. Evos Thera, the High Council leader, studied Ilara with an unreadable expression. The silence stretched on, long enough that it felt as though the very air in the room had thickened with anticipation. Then, with a slow, deliberate gesture, Thera spoke. "Your defiance, Terran, is not without merit. We have underestimated your resolve, but do not mistake that for an invitation to remake the galaxy in your image. There are consequences to upsetting the delicate balance of power." Ilara's response was immediate, her voice unwavering. "Then let there be consequences, because we cannot stand idly by while the weak are crushed under the weight of an outdated system. Humanity is ready to take responsibility for the future of the galaxy, not just for ourselves, but for all those who have been forgotten." A ripple of unease passed through the room. The Atran were beings of power, but they were not infallible. In recent years, their grip on the galaxy had weakened, and the growing strength of the Union of Sovereign Stars was a sign that the times were changing. It wasn't just humanity's military might that had them worried. It was the idea that the galaxy no longer needed the Atran to maintain order. Shorlian, another member of the High Council, finally spoke, her voice low and dangerous. "Your words are reckless, Terran. You underestimate the consequences of such a shift. We will not let you dismantle the galaxy's stability without a fight. If you wish to lead, you must prove that humanity can protect what it seeks to build." Ilara's eyes flashed, but her response was calm. "We will protect it, not with empty promises, but with action. The Zethori were just the beginning. There will be more challenges, more threats to the Union, but we will face them together, and we will not falter." The room held its breath as the Atran deliberated in their way, communicating with subtle shifts in their psychic presence. Finally, Thera's voice broke the silence. "Very well, Commander Voss. If you wish to prove humanity's strength, we will grant you the opportunity. You will face the trials of the Atran, an ancient rite, one that has tested the mettle of all who have claimed they could reshape the galaxy. Succeed, and your place at the head of this new order will be secured." Ilara's heart raced, but her face remained impassive. She had prepared for this. The trials of the Atran were legendary, a series of tests designed to push individuals to their physical, mental, and emotional limits. It was not a simple contest of strength, but of willpower, intelligence, and the ability to navigate the complex web of galactic power. "I accept," Ilara said firmly, her voice carrying through the hall. "Whatever it takes, I will prove that humanity is ready to lead." Thera inclined their head slightly, as if acknowledging the resolve in her words. "Then prepare yourself. The trials will begin at once. You will face them alone, Commander Voss. Should you fail, humanity's ambitions will be shattered. Should you succeed, the galaxy will witness the birth of a new era." As the council room faded away, Ilara was transported to a new realm, a space that seemed to stretch beyond time itself. The first of the trials began. A figure materialized before her, one of the Atran's ancient constructs, an entity woven from both flesh and thought, its form shifting constantly as it attacked her with both physical and psychic assaults. Ilara's breath caught in her throat, but she fought to maintain control. This was not just a battle for her life. This was a battle for humanity's future. The galaxy was watching. The trials were not just about strength. They were about proving humanity's ability to persevere, to adapt, and to thrive. The construct lunged at her, but Ilara sidestepped with a fluid motion, drawing on every ounce of training. Every lesson learned on the battlefield, every strategy honed over the years of her leadership. The first test was only the beginning, but as she struck back with the precision of a seasoned warrior, she knew one thing for certain: she was ready. The trials would not break her. Humanity's destiny would not be denied.